I guess I'm getting a little jumpy here, trying to get ahead of that guy with the big voice as he introduces me. I was going to point out during the break just a moment ago, I stepped outside and I mentioned to some of my coworkers that indeed Harper Lee had passed away. And look, she hadn't had a major book out, in over 50 some years, almost 60 years. And so their looks were like, "Who's that?" We'll talk about that perhaps in a few minutes. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Speaking of that, I had a thought a short while ago because um, I had a chance, and I was looking at a video from the Heritage Foundation online. There's a university, a very prestigious university in Virginia called George Mason. In fact, George Mason Estate, which is not far from there, is a National Historic Site. I was in a wedding party at the George Mason Estate way back in 1998, I believe it was, wearing a black tuxedo when it was like 98 degrees outside. In that part of the country, too, that comes with about 98% humidity. But this very prestigious university, Heritage Foundation, decided to go out and show students photographs of Joe Biden, Ronald Reagan, and one of the Kardashian sisters, and try to get a reaction from students as to who these people were. And these students, most of them were history and political science majors that were being interviewed.
Can you tell me who this is?
No. No.
Who is this gentleman?
I have no idea.
I don't recognize who that is. No.
Ooh, I'm not sure. I don't know who that is.
Don't know.
No?
Don't care about politics.
I don't know.
Joe Biden.
Oh no. John McCain.
I have no idea. But I probably should, but I also don't pay attention to a lot.
Was that a former president? Yeah. Was that Nixon, maybe?
Oh, that's, I've seen that guy before. I feel bad. I'm not sure who that is.
Is that Bill Clinton?
A politician of sorts.
Ah, dude, I feel like I know him. Crap. I don't want to guess wrong, so I'm just not going to guess.
Richard Nixon.
Oh God, I don't remember his name. No, that is not Nixon.
It starts with Ronald Reagan.
I don't know which one. Sorry. No, I can't. That's Kim Kardashian.
Ryan, who is this?
Kim Kardashian.
Yeah, that's Kim Kardashian.
Kim Kardashian.
Kim Kardashian.
Kim Kardashian.
Kim Kardashian. Kim Kardashian.
Kim Kardashian.
Kim Kardashian.
Kim Kardashian.
Can you tell me who's running for president besides Hillary Clinton?
It's a guy with a lot of money. This is gonna make me look stupid. I don't want to do this.
Mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished.
Can you tell me the name of the Vice President of the United States?
Joe Biden.
Can you tell me who is a current U.S. Senator?
Any current U.S. senator? My senator is Claire McCaskill.
Now, that last voice was a student's mom, who could say who the vice president was and tell her who one of her senators. So the mother was obviously she was an intelligent woman. But I give him a little slack on Ronald Reagan. The man has been dead now 11 years. And you have to go back to, well, let's see, he left office January of 1989. So a lot of these college students weren't even born yet. So seeing his picture, on the other hand, he is in the pantheon of American presidents, even people who didn't like him. He had such an impact that he does have a somewhat familiar face. And that was probably the confusion. And Richard Nixon, no, wait a minute, as they were grasping to try and find out who that happened to be. On the other hand, these students, as I mentioned, are majors either in history or political science. And they will likely be voting. They'll be voting this fall. Now, should they be allowed to vote if they can't pick out certain people or name a U.S. senator? I've been on this topic before. I think we need a literacy test before people vote. I got my letter in the mail yesterday telling me that, I've cleared the hurdle and I'm now a voter in Idaho. I stayed away from it my first year in town because I felt I needed to know the players first, a little bit more about them. But then I decided, you know what? Now that you're here and now that you know who people are and certain names are and all of that, and you've gotten a feel for the place, you've got to register and be a voter. And I feel that's important. And with the primary coming up, last Friday was the very last day you could register to vote in the Republican primary. So I got that done, and I got the letter yesterday telling me that I'm in. But I knew who some of the people were here in Idaho before I even moved here. I remember when Butch Otter was in Congress some years ago. And yet I'm amazed by the number of people you meet, even people who are relatively astute about some of these things. It's just not there. I read a great column. We were talking about Donald Trump in the last hour. And I read a great column from a writer by the name of Timothy Carney. And he says that Trump spells the end of ideology. But Carney's point is this. He said, people in media, and that includes me, we try to pigeonhole listeners, voters, readers, everyone. We try to pigeonhole them into certain categories. Well, you are a conservative voter. You are a liberal voter. I don't know that anybody's really middle of the road. But his point today in his column is this. A lot of Americans don't necessarily have ideology, or maybe they're conservative on one issue, but they're fairly liberal on another issue. It's been said about Trump's voters. They're concerned about national defense. Well, that's generally a conservative viewpoint, right? Liberals would just as soon see this country destroyed, I'm sure. And they're concerned, Trump supporters, about illegal immigrants coming here and not following the rule of law. Well, many conservatives, that's important. But the reason that most of Trump supporters are concerned about that is they just don't want people coming here taking their jobs away. And they don't want their jobs all being shipped off all the way over to China or Bangladesh or somewhere else, Malaysia. And you're trying to get ahead in this country and somebody just keeps pulling the rug out from under you. And he goes on to say that he's meeting many people out there who are voting, and they're voting for the personality. And even though Trump is not necessarily specific about what he will do to save America, when he says make America great again, it resonates with a great many people. So I think that's very, very true. I will meet people on the street who tell me they listen to my program, and then they'll say to me, generally no one comes up to you and says, I hate it. If they don't like it, they try to avoid you. But I will meet people and they say, well, I agree with you on a lot of things, or most things. But no one ever comes up to me and says, I agree with you 100%. And I think we have to keep that in mind. And I think that that's an important reason that we're seeing someone like Trump pretty well walk away with it this year. It's 9:15. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 39. We have a caller with us. You're up next. You're on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com.
Hey, Bill, you played that little audio with Hillary Clinton and the dog. I agree with her. I think we need one of those dogs. Because I think the first thing you'll notice is the dog on the Democrat side will be hoarse and can't bark at all. Because it's been barking so much that it needs a lozenge. Now, on the Republican side, true story. It's going to bark. We know we have some politicians out there on the Republican side that are Republican. On that note, we need to remember we get to vote in March for our choice. And we need to level our heads and remember what we stand for. And don't vote in anger because somebody is yelling out what you feel.
Yeah.
I just can't get over how a couple of our politicians on our side for president are acting like Democrats when somebody brings up their past history and they start yelling liar, liar, deflecting and everything else. It's just ridiculous when you can go and prove it yourself.
And last week's debate was the liars debate by the sounds of things. Thank you much for the call too as well. I guess it's the Liars Club now. You're up next. You're on the air on KLIX.
Good morning, Bill. Been a while since I talked to you. The people, when they're voting, things like that, they'll say they're conservative, they worry about the Constitution, things like that. But if you notice right now, none of our legislatures, I can't say none of them, there's a couple of them from here in Idaho, are trying to defend the rights of the guys over in Burns, Oregon. they've showed up there under this coalition of representatives and things, but you don't see none of them speaking publicly about all the violations of the Constitution that the government's doing with them. As far as arresting them on false charges, they don't have the right to assemble.
They play it safe. That's what politicians do. They're playing it safe.
Yeah, that's when people need to remember when they go up here to our primary, if they're too lazy to get out and speak with the people, then they don't deserve being in office.
Well, thank you much for the telephone call. And yeah, you've got a lot of people in politics. They just throw the flag around their shoulders, or they show you that picture of Ronald Reagan and said, I liked him, you should like him, so you'll like me. But they give a lot of lip service to Constitution and to the country, but they're really in it primarily for themselves. We have another caller with us. You're next. You're on Top Story with Bill Colley.
Hi. I wanted to talk to you a little about something you were talking yesterday about the school over in Burley and the extra money.
Sure.
I'll tell you what the problem is. The state legislature recently passed a law, I think last year, so they could eliminate bidding process on these schools. They can just pick a construction manager, they can pick an architect, they can pick whoever they want, and then they can go out and pick the contractor. They have buddies, and they have all kinds of other people they put in. Now, they did this because they thought it would be more simple, but also raises the price because the contractor then is not responsible for anything that goes wrong in the price of the buildings. I fought this for years. I was a contractor in this valley for 53 years, and I know. And it's a good old boys club from eastern Idaho to western Idaho, and the legislature voted them in to do this, and I'll tell you why. Because they didn't want to think about it and get a contractor and have a bid process that's by law for our state up till this last signing this over. And consequently, you got people on school boards that couldn't build rabbit hutches making a decision in millions of dollars, and they couldn't make $1 million if they lived to be 10,000 years old. But yet they'll tax the taxpayer, and it should go back to a bid process. No matter where you're from, no matter who you are, you should have a bid process. That'll keep the prices down. That'll make it competitive, and they have to follow the specs. If they don't do that, they lose through their bond.
Well, I've got to let you run because we're coming up against a hard break. But thank you for the update on that. And here's a point to be made very quickly, if I could, before the break. You know what? You need a taxpayer organization to stand up now and file a suit then, and make a challenge to this, because these poor people out in that school system are going to be raked over the coals on this. And then now the threats, well, if we don't do it now, we'll never do it. Well, then don't do it. Thank you. That guy was a great caller. 20 after 9. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I've got plenty more coming up. Speaking of stories from yesterday, an update on that story about that fellow using that women's locker room in Seattle. We mentioned yesterday, Washington State has that gender-neutral law now in place where people can go in and use any bathroom they want. If a man says he's a woman, he can use the ladies' room or even wander into a locker room. And they had a case just this past week in Seattle where a guy did that not once but twice. He went in and took his clothes off the first time. Then he came back to watch the little girls who were swimming at a local pool. Well, there's an update to this story. We'll give you that in just a moment. I do want to mention, though, one of the reasons this program is successful, still here with you, that is that we have a great many people who support this radio station, including High Desert Meat Processing right here in Twin Falls, where they process one animal at a time. What you bring in is exactly what you'll get back. Darren Van Horn, the owner of High Desert Meat Processing, he's been doing this for nearly 35 years. You can give High Desert Meat Processing a look on Facebook and read reviews of other customers, or you can call Darren, and you can call him for all of your wild game and domestic processing needs. 734-9949. High Desert Meat does in-house smoking, and nothing is shipped out. Specialty meats, jerky, pepperoni, salami, summer sausage, brats, Polish dogs, much more, too, as well. USDA approved. Darren works closely with local beef growers and their programs to ensure quality meat. 734-9949. So while they're having this problem in Washington State with some of these very strange dudes going in to look up women's skirts or to undress in front of them, and the guy was not arrested because the law says he can use the facility if he claims that he is a woman, even though he biologically looks exactly like a man. Well, this comes from sayanythingblog.com. South Dakota wants you to use the bathroom corresponding with your biological gender, and the writer says that makes sense. The writer is Rob Port. The South Dakota Senate on Tuesday followed earlier approval by the House to pass a bill that would require public school students to use the bathroom, shower, and locker room that correspond to their biological sex. If Republican Governor Dennis Doggett signs the bill, as expected, South Dakota would become the first state to approve such a law. The writer says, makes sense to me, though it's no surprise the reaction from some quarters would be accusations of anti-trans bigotry. Now, Matt Walsh, who's a writer at The Blaze, Glenn Beck's The Blaze, and my former coworker, I worked with Matt at a radio station back east. Matt Walsh has a column out today where he says, this Washington State case proves the folly of liberalism because a liberal woman who was interviewed who supports the law that allows people who aren't sure what they are to use whatever facility they like, she said that no matter the dangers involved, we have to be willing to make those sacrifices. In other words, if some woman is raped or some little girl is molested by some fellow who comes storming in and decides he's going to use that facility because he claims he's a woman, well, that's just something we have to live with. And Matt says that tells you all you need to know about the liberal mindset. They don't care if they bring people to this country who will shout Allah Akbar and shoot up a workplace because they don't want to hurt that person's feelings. They don't care if an illegal immigrant comes here and shoots Kate Steinle on a pier because, well, she was white and probably deserved it, being an oppressor, as you know. They don't care that some guy who'd like to rape your little girl goes into the locker room and uses that as an excuse because they don't want to hurt the pervert's feelings. 9:27, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And you have people like that in Idaho. You don't have anywhere near as many, but a few weeks ago I was looking at our Facebook page, our News Radio 1310, KLIX Facebook page. Let me make sure I get all of that in there. And there was a Democrat from Gooding. I didn't know that there were any Democrats out there. And this broad, she was just making a stink about me being on the air and how bigoted I am, how wrong it is, and the radio station should fire me because I won't go along with all of this baloney they keep peddling. As I say, a Democrat in Gooding is probably a very, very rare sight, but they're there. I mean, these people are around. And they'll try to. Their argument is, well, that's a bigot and that's a mean, and they'll pull out every stop they can to get rid of anybody who's in opposition, including somebody that they hear on the radio, because we are a threat to their perverted approach to life in America. That's why we're going to be overrun with Muslim terrorists. That's why we're being overrun by illegal immigrants, and that's why your little girl is going to go into the bathroom, and there's going to be some 30-year-old pervert there waiting to do some serious, serious harm to her. And I'm telling you, these people have to be stopped. We've had enough. Every time you turn around, somebody is saying, well, we've got to do it because no, we don't. If you want to take this country back, you've got to start by making sure that we shut the liberals up as they've been trying to shut us up, and we learn to say no. And if someone comes in and says, I want you to bake a cake, I'm getting married to a horse, I want you to bake a cake for me, and you say no, good for you. Stand your ground. If we had more people doing it, they wouldn't be able to handle it. The government would be so overwhelmed that they would have to just throw up their hands and say, we can't do it any longer. That's what happens when people ignore an unjust law in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or the millions. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. 38 this morning, on our way somewhere into the 40s. We won't see a really good warm-up until late next week.